Kia ora koutou. It's wonderful to have everybody here on this, in Wellington anyway, sunny afternoon. Hopefully it's sunny elsewhere. Welcome to Te Pūtiaki Manataonga, the Association of Educators Beyond the Classroom webinar, 7th webinar in our series about adapting programs for online learning. So as usual, we'll start with the karakia, and then I'll introduce the speakers. But before I do that, I'll just remind you that this webinar will be recorded and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel and on our website with guests' faces blurred out so that people who can't make it to the live event can watch and listen later on. Okay. Whakatakati hau ki te uru, whakatakati hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. So I'm so delighted to be able to invite and introduce all of our guest speakers today. So today we're going to hear about two different approaches to adapting museum programs for online learning. Both approaches were designed in response to schools contacting museums and requesting a distance learning experience. One was created and taught within COVID level 3 restrictions, where the museum and the schools were closed and the museum educators were teaching from home and the students were individually learning from home. And one was created and taught within COVID alert level 2 restrictions, where the museum educators had access to their museum and the students were learning at school. Both have used slightly different digital tools and they've both taken a slightly different approach to creating a virtual experience for students. We'll hear about things that worked well and some things that didn't go to plan. But both of these online learning programs have resulted in some really great engagement for students. So it's my pleasure to introduce the speakers today. Firstly, we will hear from educators at Hui Te Ananui Te Tangaroa, the National Maritime Museum in Auckland, Lee Stanley and Natalie Harbert, who developed their program in level 3 restrictions. Then after that, we'll hear from educators at Te Matatua, the National Army Museum in Waiouru, Debbie Clooney, Pare Bennett and Marlene Smith, who developed their program in level 2 restrictions. When they've finished their presentations, then we're hoping to allow time for questions. So if you have any questions or comments or ideas in response to what's being said throughout the presentation, please, as usual, just put them in the chat and we'll refer to them at the end. Okay, so without further ado, I will hand over to Lee and Natalie at the National Maritime Museum.
Ko rangitata te motu.
Ko waitemata te moana.
Ko hui te ananui a Tangaroa te wharitaonga ti hei mauri ora. Ko Natalie Takaingoa, my name is Natalie.
And ko Lee Takaingoa, my name is Lee. Kia ora. And this is a picture of our museum. So this is the New Zealand Maritime Museum, Hui Te Ananui a Tangaroa. This is where Natalie and I work. We've got our colleague also in the call here, our fearless leader, Lee Tanoa, and we look after the education. We have about 10,000 school students per year coming through, and we teach them all sorts of different topics from explorers and adventurers, ara moana, ocean roads, keep the oceans clean, a whole lot of things. But we teach from year 0 all the way up to year 13, but our sweet spot's around the year 5 to 8 age level. And so we got closed down over 100 days ago, and we grabbed our laptops and left the building, and then we had to figure out how to connect with our students. I'll go to the next slide.
So our presentation today, we've called it Bursting the Bubble, Connecting in a Virtual Classroom. And what how we're going to do this today is we're going to start by explaining what the virtual classroom looks like in our situation, and then how we planned the lesson, pre-activities that we came up with, what we did on the day, and then our feedback that we got from schools. So to go into what the virtual classroom looks like on our next slide. So at the moment, we are still in COVID Alert Level 3, Step 2, bit of a mouthful. We have been in Alert Level 4 and Alert Level 3, Step 3 for quite a lot of the time. So that has meant that we've had a lot of restrictions. We've been in our homes, students and teachers have been in their homes as well. We haven't been allowed to get into the museum, so we haven't had our collection available to us to use. We're just using what we have at home, and students and teachers are in that same situation. So these were just things that we had to keep in mind when thinking about what teaching online would look like. Teachers and students may be tired and stressed. Everyone is stuck at home in their bubble, whatever that looks like, and maintaining all the mayhem that's going on around while trying to learn. There are different online learning requirements. So some schools check in multiple times throughout the day, but other schools might only meet a couple of times a week. For those tech-savvy students, you can't always know exactly what's going on. They may be there on the call, but they've got another tab open where they're gaming or chatting. So these were just things to be prepared for and have in mind. And this helped us to focus on what we wanted our online lessons to look like, what we wanted to provide, because going on a school trip is so exciting. Coming to the museum is so exciting. And so we kept that in mind when thinking about how we could do our planning. What can we do to give students that feeling, that exciting feeling of going on a trip through an online lesson?
I went the wrong way. There we go. So as soon as we locked down, we contacted all our classes and all our schools that had booked, and we didn't hear anything back. I think they were all trying to solve their own problems and sort out their own routines. Eventually, towards the end of term 3, we started getting schools interested in what can we offer. Some of them wanted to just have a different face, a different program that wasn't linked to any of their curriculum. And some of them did want us to deliver a program that was linked to their learning goals. When we did get contacted, we set up an initial meeting. So this was the who, what, when. We decided when we were going to meet, how many classes we're going to meet at a time. Sometimes there were like 450 students to get through. So we didn't want to teach like a whole week, all day, every day. So the sweet spot for us was to teach about 2 classes at once. And then we'd figure out what the learning objectives were, and then figure out what platform they're using, whether it was Google Meet or Zoom, and then we'd decided that a 30-minute lesson is about right. They didn't want us talking at them for that long, and then we had question and answers after that. After that initial meeting, we went and had, Natalie and I went away and we figured out what we'd do in the lesson, something to get them interested in. And then we sent some resources and meeting times, etc. And then we got, what do we do next, Natalie?
So these were our pretty invitations that we sent out. And these were just made using a free account on Canva. And I believe the link will be shared in the chat now or later on. So just to have a really professional looking invitation that can get kids excited about a concrete thing that's coming up, something to be excited for. And in this invitation, we explained the day and the time, and we gave them a pre-visit activity to do. So the point of this was to ignite students' prior knowledge on the topic, in this example, explorers and adventurers, and prompt their engagement and thinking with some kind of call to action. So for this school and the explorers and adventurers lesson, we asked students to just use what they have at home, because we understand that under level 3, under level 4, they can't go into school, they might not have access to a printer, they can't go to Kmart and get some cool bits and pieces to stick on. So just using what they had at home to make an exploration hat and pack their bag ready for an adventure. And then we gave them some packing tips, and these packing tips were questions to kind of prompt them to think about the kind of things that we were going to cover in our lesson. And then when we did our lesson, we went through these. So we would have our backpack and say, okay, well, how will you know where to go? What did you pack? And all the kids can hold up what they've packed. Okay, you've got a map, we've got this. And then that would lead into one of our stories. So this was an awesome thing to do for year 3-4 students around that age. Obviously for older students, creating an exploration hat and packing your bag isn't going to work. So for example, we had a year 5 and 6 heroes program, and we asked them to make some wristbands with the qualities that heroes have. So these are some of the wristbands, and then throughout that lesson we would get them to hold up those qualities if that was a quality that the hero we were talking about showed, and we also had some actions that went with that. So on this, we're going to show you what it was like on the day. Here's Lee on the day with his explorer's hat ready to go.
Okay. On the day, we, as you can guess, we didn't have much experience doing this, and these webinars have been great guiding us through it. We had, what did we have? We had a whole lot of students turning up late. We figured out that the best thing is to not do a presentation, a lesson on a Tuesday after a long weekend at 9 a.m. because the students are all kind of turning up in various pajamas, they're lying on their beds eating breakfast, and the teacher hasn't even taken the roll call or got them settled or set the expectations. So we quickly learned that, you know, push it back a little bit, get the time, give them the class a bit of time to settle in, get the teacher to set the expectations, and that worked really, really well. Also, what worked was to meet with the teachers in the lobby and just reset the expectations with them, and then they let all the class students in. They introduced us and then reiterated what we're expecting. I think it's really hard to connect with the students. You've never met them. They've got their screens off, and you're in, you know, they've got chaos going on in the background. Some of them are sharing devices, etc. So it's really hard to get that connection with them straight away. And also to ask them to actually get up out of their seats and be active. We didn't want it to be a 30-minute lesson and us just talking straight at them, sharing some slides and then turning off. We wanted them to be involved and up and moving. So we found it quite hard to do that. Sometimes we felt like a little bit like we're an actor acting in a green screen studio. We couldn't see and get that response from the students. And at the moment, I'm sharing my screen. I can only see 4 people, and the rest of you got your cameras off. But I'm going to actually ask you to turn your cameras on because we're going to do one of our activities. We're going to do some a very basic introduction to some wayfinding, some navigation. So if I can ask you all to get up out of your seats and turn your cameras on. We're going to imagine that we're on a waka that's sailing down from Polynesia, somewhere from Hawaii, and it's coming to Aotearoa. They've been following some tohu, some signs, so they may have seen kawaka or some birds migrating, and they've disappeared, but they know that they were traveling south. So you need to carry on sailing your waka south, but you don't have a phone, you don't have a compass, you don't have it, you can just use the signs in nature. So we got the students up out of their seat, and we imagined that the sun was rising, and then so they could use the sun rising, it rises in the east, to find all the other directions, and the direction they want to sail is south. So we got them up, standing and pointing with their arms. You're going to point out and point to the rising sun. You might want to put your sunglasses on. It's getting a bit bright. And then that is Whitinga, that is the east, and you're pointing there with your right arm. And then you can put your left hand on top of that. Now you're pointing, and the sun is going to travel up and over the sky. Keep on pointing east with your right arm. Take your left arm over. And now you're pointing west, that is to Tomokanga. So you've got Whitinga east and Tomokanga. If you clap your hands, that's Raki, that's north. Where is south? That's the opposite. So you do a quick jump around and you're facing south. Turn your waka, you're facing south, and you can sail away. You can use the sun, you can use the moon and the stars. They all rise in the east, and you can use that to orientate yourself. So that was a basic example of, you can all sit down now, thank you. You can hide away and put your cameras off if you'd like. I hope you just want to, we wanted you to recognize the energy you have now by sitting down and doing an activity in a lesson. And that's kind of what we wanted to get in our lessons. We didn't want it to be just one directional where we're giving them information. We want them to be involved. So we had them running up lighthouse keepers steps. We had them rowing boats out to rescue people, and it was fantastic. It was a great way of getting them included. But that works really well with the younger students. So having these webinars was awesome, because then we got some tools to use for the older students. Natalie, is that you or was it me?
So I'll just kind of do a little overview of our process, just to remind you what we did, and maybe cover that point as well, Lee. So in planning an online delivery, we started off by meeting with the teaching team to plan a lesson. We sent out an invitation and other learning resources, like writing prompts or something that we thought could go with it. On the day, we joined the online class link which the school had provided. So we just wanted to keep it as simple as possible for the students and come in on the class that's normally set up for them. And then we did a 30-minute lesson plus Q&A, and we tried to make this as interactive as possible by getting the kids up and moving. As we went on and the more lessons we've done, we realized that these actions aren't going to work for all students. So using some of the other tools that we've learned about on through these webinars, like Peer Deck, we were able to incorporate that and make it interactive in other ways for older students who might not be so keen about getting up and pretending to run up lighthouse stairs. We kept the expectations that students would have their cameras on and their microphones off until we had the Q&A at the end. We'd take time to get a team photo or a screenshot, and then at the end we would check in with teachers for feedback. And so, I mean, it didn't all go perfectly. It was a lot of fun, but it wasn't perfect, and it didn't have to be. We were in level 3 restrictions, so were the kids and the teachers. It was using the resources that we had at the time to do something fun.
I'll go to the next slide. So what we found, we immediately checked in with the teachers straight afterwards. How was that? What could we do to improve? They were really thankful for the lessons that we did. We had we also sent them a SurveyMonkey link. The SurveyMonkey was not that we got some people replying. We wanted more, but I think getting some verbal feedback and some kind of an email feedback was great. We've got one on our screen here. From the same lesson, we had 2 teachers come back with differing opinions. One said that we wanted more activity, and I think if the only way of getting more activity was to actually ditch the lesson and do some PE with them. We had them up out of their seats the whole time. And then the other teacher said we maybe less activity but more interactivity, and then that was great, because then the next time we were teaching, we used Peer Deck, which was great for getting the students involved. That didn't go so well because they couldn't see all of their own responses, but we quickly got around all of that and shared the screen and things like that. Peer Deck was good, and Natalie put a Kahoot and a quiz at the end of the lesson, which kind of it gave a good bit of energy. So especially as for the older students, there's lots of tools there. Like Natalie said, it doesn't always go well, but then we're playing with it. Everyone knows that we're doing our best, and then we just learn from it and take it on to the next lesson. So in the end, I think it was just the point of difference that we were bringing from their usual lessons from their teachers was we were kind of fresh, a lot of energy, and we gave them some activities in the lesson to do rather than just sitting there. All right. And
definitely wearing a silly hat was just the icing on the cake. So where to from here? Well, for us in Tamaki Makaurau, we're still obviously waiting to move into the COVID protection framework. So we're waiting to find out what that means to our museum and school visitors. And so we're looking forward to the National Army Museum's presentation and hearing from others out there who are at other levels and who have taught online, either from your home to the classroom, from museums to student homes, or museum to classroom. There's so many different options out there, but we've really had a lot of fun learning how we can deliver in this under these constrictions, and we do really feel that we can take this and include it in our everyday offering, perhaps to schools that are in other parts of the country that wouldn't normally get the opportunity to come and visit us. We'd also like to further incorporate some of the new tools like Peer Deck, Padlet and Kahoot, so that we can have that interaction with students in a variety of ways, not just physical movement, even though the physical movement is really good at keeping them engaged in the lesson. And we also thought perhaps about recording parts of the lesson. For example, if there's something that we know we do in every lesson, or that we really want it to be succinct, we want to prevent feeling fatigued if we've got multiple lessons, then perhaps we could have part of it recorded and part of it live. And just kind of a question for us going forward is that we haven't been charging, and we know that others like Te Papa haven't been charging, but what would we do if this was an ongoing delivery? Would we have a charge associated with it? So yeah, that's us, and that's our online program. We hope that it has inspired you to feel like maybe teaching online isn't that scary, that you don't need a lot. If you are really interested in the kids like you would be in the classroom, you want to connect on their level, you're willing to maybe do something a little bit silly or have fun with them, then they will feel that even through the camera, through the screen. You
don't even need a museum.
Yeah.
But it helps. It really helps. We're really looking forward to getting back into our whare and welcoming the students back, however that will be. But we've really enjoyed it, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to share what we've learned. Hopefully that inspires you. Some of you might be way more advanced than us, and some of you might be like we are, just at the beginning of the journey. So look forward to hearing your comments and questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie and Lee. That was amazing. I can see in the chat that some questions are coming through, and Beverly has her hand raised. We'll keep all those questions holding, and we'll listen to the next presentation, and then we'll do all questions at the end, just so that we can try and stick to time. What I really loved about your presentation is that you're really open and honest and upfront about, you just gave it a go. You did what you could with what you had at home, and you're learning as you're going and refining things as you're going, which is what all of us do anyway in the classroom, in our museums. We just refine our practice as we go. And I really love the fact that you really tried hard to make your online learning engaging, not didactic, not just telling people information, but really getting that engagement and interactivity going. So thank you. So we'll now pass over to the National Army Museum educators and hear about them and what they did in a different circumstance in level 2 restrictions, where they had access to their museum and the schools were open. Children were learning in school rather than at home. So that's quite a different scenario. And then at the end, we'll take questions. So over to you, National Army Museum.
Thank you, Helen. Can we have the first slide, please, Mel? Ko ruapehu te maunga, ko hautapu te awa, ko Ngāti Tūmatoenga te iwi, ko Marlene aho.
Ko Dewi aho.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Pare Bennett tēnā he mihi atu nei kia koutou.
Next slide, please, Mel. Ngāti Tūmatoenga, the tribe of the war god, is the iwi of the army. In this pic, notice the crossed weapons. These denote the bicultural aspirations of the New Zealand Army. Every soldier, regardless of ethnicity, is induced into Ngāti Tūmatoenga, and our museum, because we are NZDF, is bicultural too, or becoming bicultural. How that presents itself in our museum is often around whakawhanaungatanga. So we put great store by connecting with the manahiri that come to the museum, and we try and do it in a personal way rather than just introductions, kind of one-way traffic. We try and incorporate āko in what we're doing. We like the idea of reciprocal learning. We don't like the idea of sage on the stage and that pedagogical approach. And I think that there's something about museums that actually encourages you to be sage on the stage, but we have worked quite hard to move away from that approach. We endeavour to always show respect, and we're aware that our audiences or our manuhiri are diverse, and so as three really experienced teachers, we do a bit of scanning of the room and try and connect with all of the students. Why I've just said all of that makes some sense when we talk about teaching remotely. Can I have the next slide, please, Mel? When students arrive at the museum, our museum, we haven't got a photo of it. This is our classroom, which is outside the museum. Our museum is quite intimidating, and it's meant to be intimidating. It's like a fort, and you know, there's all sorts of obvious reasons why that's the case. We were lucky enough to get this building, and we welcome the students into this building, and we try and help them to feel that this building is theirs for the duration of their visit. They bring their bags in, their whatever, and settle into that space. And we will do our health and safety briefings and whatnot from there before we go over to the museum, which is across the car park. Pare, over to you about other things that we do to help students feel at home.
Kia ora, tātou. So with the enriching local curriculum, we endeavour to put the curriculum into a local context for all of our manuhiri, our visiting schools. So prior to their arrival, we will research tūpuna, ancestors, wāhi tapu, significant natural areas, marae, whakapapa genealogies. We will also research settlers, early settlers, streets or heritage buildings in the locale that the students are coming from, and also current issues, really current successes, whether they're sporting or cultural or an environmental project that their community is involved in, so that when the students arrive, we are able to weave connections together immediately by honouring their significant people and places. And you do see students and the adults that accompany them, you can sense that they appreciate that we've taken the time to find that out about them. And that is a tikanga Māori practice as well, to, in the first instance, make those connections to your visitors. And the pedagogy underlying that is really about open questioning. So, you know, it could be like, where do you play or celebrate, and why do you go to that place to celebrate? What's special about that place? Why do you think the early ancestors and settlers decided to settle here? What's unique about your place? So that probably is about a 5 to 7 minute conversation that we have between our students, just to honour, really. It's about honouring their people and their places. That's me.
Great, thanks, Pare. And I know I'm speaking to the converted, but the journey of becoming biculturally aware is a journey with many treacherous steps in it, if you're a Pākehā. And I don't say that in any sort of way except to honour the contribution that people like Pare and Edina and others in our team give in continually teaching us about it. So I think one of the things that's worth mentioning just at the moment is that there's 8 of us in our team, because we've got 5 kaiarahi as well, and we're all on that journey together, and we're all learning all the time, and we do a lot of crashing and burning. That's kind of almost like our style now, but that's because we keep on pushing ourselves into areas that might not be all that comfortable. So I'm just about to talk to you about a couple of those areas. During the first lockdown, the first national lockdown in 2020, we did not go into Zoom world at all, apart from every now and then we had a little Zoom amongst our team just so that I could feel tearful looking at all my colleagues that I never was getting to see. Instead, what we did was we wrote a lot of teacher resources, and we pushed them out through Facebook to teachers who were teaching remotely for the first time, and tried to support them and giving them some scenarios that compared COVID-19 with another time in New Zealand's history, which was really challenging, and how people responded then and how people are responding now. And those lessons, if any of you are interested, are on our website under learning. They're freely available, and we got a great response from teachers. So yeah, no, not in Zoom world at all, not remote learning world at all. But when we came back into the museum, when after that lockdown, as all of you know, school leadership and boards of trustees were very reluctant to let their children go very far from home, and understandably so. This just gutted our bookings, because to get to pretty much everybody that comes to us is travelling more than an hour, usually more than 2 hours to get to us. And so yeah, we just had a huge rash of cancellations. We had an Auckland intermediate that were coming down to visit us as part of their school camp, and they, because that wasn't happening, decided instead to, 3 teachers at this intermediate decided instead to do an inquiry with the students, where the students could research whatever they wanted, and they would set it up in this shared classroom space as a type of a museum. There were 3 teachers, intermediate age students, 88 of them. And they approached us, because they had been going to visit us anyway, to help them teach the students how to set up an exhibition, to set up a display. So we had no program that looked like that. So what we did, our end, was to meet and deconstruct the stages of setting up a display, and various members of our team and the curatorial team jumped in on specialisation areas and said that they would deliver a session. So we had large numbers of remote sessions. They were about 30 minutes long, but not always. They weren't delivered once, they were delivered more than once, often because at the other end, the students were setting their own timetables for their work, and they were opting into our sessions when it suited them. So we would deliver the session and then deliver the same session again a few days later, so that they could set up their classroom timetable. What else do I need to tell you about that? So can I have the next slide, please, Mel? So in these slides, you can see our people working with students in the museum. Obviously, in the situation of this school, there were no students in the museum. So generally, it worked out that we had the person taking the session plus Debbie, who was following them around with her little cell phone, filming them. There was no high tech here, but it actually ended up working really, really well. So Gary, who had experience of setting up displays in a previous role that he had, he talked to the students about how you have, the things that you need to consider before you plan your display. And anybody that's ever taught year 7 and 8 know that they don't want to do that. They want to go straight into the display, but he did a great session with them about that. Next slide, please, Mel. This is Daniel, who's also in our team. He has got his own personal collection. He's wearing some of it right there. And he is experienced at presenting his collection around, and at the Cambridge Fair and whatnot. And so his area of expertise was how to attract people towards your display so that you can kind of nab them. Next slide. Here's Debbie in full flight in front of our timeline, and she is in her session, she was talking to students about visual text and how to not overload the reader. You can see on the timeline behind her, which she used, the different sizes of the text and things like that. So those were three of the presenters, but as I say, we had a number of presenters. And I'll turn over now to Debbie, and she will tell you about the things that were challenging and the things that went well.
Thanks, Marlene. Yeah, we learnt a lot. The children in our first school up north, they, through doing these sessions, apparently one of the comments was, normally we get a whole load of posters and dioramas, but this time, this is what we've got. And if we could have the next slide, please, Mel. They looked a lot at, because we talked about technology, how it could work. Next slide, please. How you can put things on a loop, how you can use colour, the size of their fonts and everything. Next slide. This guy, they used a TV, they hooked it up with their computer, so they actually stepped outside their norms. Next slide. So we've got the little diorama, but again, we've got the touchpad that you can use to do an activity. And last slide there. This one was my favourite, because why not display it in the boot of your dad's car? You know, let's get right out there. And those kids did it. They did it really, really well. So then we went, we made a planner, put it up on our website. Made suggestions, because we all know that for every one thing we suggest, the teachers will come up with 3 more that suit their kids. So it's a lead. One teacher got back to us and with another intermediate and chose 7 lessons from that planner. Now this was different in the fact that it was one class over 7 lessons, and it was over a 3 to 4 week period. We had to jump in, you know, to fit in with who was doing what. And this is where we had a few issues with technology from time to time. In that first one, we had things dropped out. And that was when we discovered in the second group was that they had a different set of Google Meets to what we had, a different version, and they had to invite us. We couldn't invite them to the museum. They had to invite me to their class. Okay, so that was our first issue. We got that sorted. And then we went through again and we filmed. I did everything on my trusty little phone. We invited curators, we did everything. And I could see some of the children on my phone, so I was able to kind of, you know, judge what was happening. Sometimes I cut the lessons short because I realised that you could see the fidgets, especially when we were doing last period in the day. That's not a good time to be doing it. Ideally, period 2, period 3 is the best time to do it. So the main problem we had was we didn't clarify that at the end of this, we would appreciate being toured through their classroom museum when it was done. Now, I wish I'd done that, and there were a few glitches at the end where the teacher got sick. Suddenly it was end of term, trying to do reports, and it all sort of fell off, and we weren't able to reconnect. I would make that a lot clearer in the future. And what was the last bit there? Oh yeah, sometimes because we couldn't record those sessions, the teacher actually had other management units that she was involved in. So 2 or 3 of those classes, there was a reliever, which meant that teacher never actually saw that session, and there were no repeats. It was a different session every time. The upside was that we were able to invite different curatorial staff in, and we realised that you could limit the lesson. You didn't have to do a full hour. 30 to 40 minutes was the best, with a chance for questions as we went. Is that about it, Marlene?
Yeah, I think so. I just want to just to tell all you people that feel like you're not digitally onto it, that Debbie feels like she's not digitally onto it, and yet she did valiant work in the museum. Like I said, with her phone, there was nothing high tech about this at all, and the feedback from the teachers was incredibly positive. And given that it was the end of the year, and when I thought that was a real success story. Now I'm going to tell you about a not success story that Pare and I particularly were involved in, which comes kind of out of that Google Meets thing. So we realised that the schools were running a different version of Google Meets to the one we had. And so Debbie did a lot of work negotiating with Google for us to get the teacher version. I think that actually we probably made life really difficult for ourselves. There was probably a lot easier way, but anyway, whatever. She did the work, we got the version, and we decided that really we needed to push ourselves further into remote learning and teaching and share our screens, get the live chat going, the whiteboard, blah, whatever. So while this was going on, a friend of mine who's a teacher from an area school up in the Waikato, they had gone back into lockdown. And so she thought it would be great if we taught her class, and we thought it would be great because we could try out all our wonderful technology. And so we negotiated with her that Pare and I would teach her Year 10 class, and Debbie and Pare would teach her Year 7 and 8 class, and the topic that we would teach would be from the New Zealand Wars, and it would be the campaign in the Waikato. Again, going back to what Pare said, local context makes much more sense. So Pare and I and Debbie, we valiantly, as I say, valiant all the way, that's the way we roll, practice sharing our screens with each other. And we had the odd glitch, but we actually thought that we were going pretty well, although every now and then we seem to lose our ability again. And so the day came, and there were a few nerves around it, and Pare and I were presenting. So we shared the link with the teacher, and the teacher shared the link with the students. The students were all at home. The teacher was at school, but that made no difference because she was teaching in an empty classroom anyway. Something that we learned straight away in retrospect is that we should have perhaps encouraged the teacher to be more facilitative in what happened, but instead she sat back and let Pare and I be experts, which didn't actually happen. So she asked the students as they all came in, she greeted them all, and at the start of the lesson, she asked the students to put their cameras on and say hello to us, which they did, and then they all turned their cameras off. So then I started presenting my screen, which I did a great technological brilliance from me. But once I had no kids there and just had letters instead, and that's what I've got right now, that's what I'm looking at right now, I found, and possibly because I set such store on whakawhanaungatanga and developing relationships and reading people's faces and all the rest of it, I found that I just dried right up. And so what I did was I just defaulted to Sage on the stage and went talk at the kids. And then Pare came on and tried as well. And then she did a lot of talking to the kids as well. And then after that, we turned it over to Debbie and she talked too. And then we all came away from the session and we're like, oh, that was so bad, so bad. But we went back to the teacher and asked her if we could have some feedback. And she said she would ask the students to give us 2 stars and a wish. So the stars were the things that we did well. And the wish was something that they thought that we could have done a wee bit better. Pare, I know you're not expecting it, but can I turn over to you about that feedback?
Sure. So a lot of the feedback was too long and it was boring, and we already knew that. And interestingly, though, some of the students said they wanted to come in person. So there was enough interest that we did provoke, so that, and I also think there was a lot of screen fatigue and 14-year-olds in their bedroom. I don't know, the mix wasn't quite there, but we were pleased that some of them said they actually did want to come. Couldn't wait. One of the comments was, can't wait to come and visit. I think what I got from it is that the pre-planning with the teacher really is a critical element to successful learning online, and setting some ground rules around, the students actually have to have their cameras on for X amount of minutes, especially at the beginning, and halfway through, just as a check-in, and then to end. So, nothing too onerous, but enough points, enough markers throughout the process so that, we could go a little deeper than we did. But yeah, it's all been good, because even though, there are limitations imposed by screens, there's a barrier, and it's not the same as face-to-face, and you can't really get energy or sense, really how someone's feeling. We can still pass something on. We still have something to share, and there is a little nugget in it, but I think we also need to be more realistic about, that nugget.
Yeah. So, and since that session, we've actually trialed using Answer Garden with the class. One of the platforms that Monica shared with us, and that's been really successful. So we feel that we need to make much more of an effort to have an interactive aspect to our sessions. Other takeaways from that session, a key one is that in New Zealand wars, difficult conversations have to happen, and remote learning with a teacher that you've never seen before is absolutely not the go. We'll never ever do that again. It was almost disrespectful that we thought that we could. As Pare said, the teacher engagement in the session to facilitate and model the way that she wants that session to go is also critical. We think that it's really important for us to keep on seeking feedback, because there's an enormous amount of learning that we can get from our end. Like, we already knew that those sessions were not good, but what the students told us was really illuminating. The authentic interaction needs to happen, because I've tried thinking through all sorts of ways that we could connect with the students as per whakawhanaungatanga, but you are really struggling. I think that something that we've discussed in our team is that recently we had a photographic exhibition in our museum, and the photographer didn't even want to put glass on his pictures. He saw that glass as a barrier between his photos and the viewer. So, the remote learning is, you can't just transfer your skills from in-person to remote learning. I think you've really got to revisit exactly what you're trying to do, and maybe keep it a lot more simple. And to that end, we've now got a team of young people, because Debbie, Pare and I call ourselves the grandparents, a team of young people in our museum who, and this is not just their skills, but they do it better than us. They are doing education clips with specific learning outcomes in certain places in our museum that we will use either as pre-teaching or post-teaching or during our sessions. They will solve the problem of the poor lighting in our museum, which is deliberate because of the moodiness of the poor lighting, and they will do voiceovers, and that we can be part of. And so that library of video clips, I see as a whole new resource area that we're going into, that's going to be really valuable for us. So that's us, Helen. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your honesty, your upfrontness, your vulnerability in sharing all things that went wrong in particular, because it's not easy to do. And, you know, all of us have times when things go wrong, but admitting that and sharing that publicly, it takes a lot of courage. So thank you so much for that. I think we'll all really appreciate that and benefit from that and feel the connection with you through our own experiences of things going wrong. So thank you so much. And I think, you know, what's also great about both of these presentations is they've both hit on that whole thing of the pedagogical approach of teaching and learning within this online space is so different to teaching and learning in a face-to-face environment. And we're all grappling with that and trying to find our way through that and trying to find the best way of getting engagement, connection, interactivity, and that sort of richness of experience that we know we can do in a face-to-face environment, but find it harder in this sort of screen-based environment. So talking through your experiments and what's worked well and what hasn't worked so well has been really valuable to hear from both organisations. I think, yeah, hands up to you. You're amazing. I think you're doing a really great job. Really love that kind of Kiwi we can do this. We don't need anything more than an iPhone and off we go. It might not have even been an iPhone. Anyway, I just think it's really great. You've done really well, both of you. I'm just scrolling back to see any questions. I think Beverly put her hand up for a question at one point. Beverly, but she hasn't put it in the chat. Did you want to say something, Beverly?
Thank you. Thank you to the Army Museum, and thank you for being honest about your mistakes. I'm from the Elms Te Papa in Tauranga, and we're in the process of looking at our programs too. And that was wonderful. We're very grateful.
Oh, thank you.
That's nice. Thank you. That's fantastic. We've had lots of really positive feedback in the comments. I don't know if you've been able to notice all the comments that have come in while you've been presenting, but yeah, everybody is just so interested and found this really useful. We had a question from Grace early on about whether, I think that was for the Maritime Museum, whether you've been delivering mainly to Auckland schools or whether you've been delivering to schools from around New Zealand. And she also asked, when did you start delivering online?
Michelle asked about a few comments.
Oh, did she? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't see that. Michelle's answered that comment. That's great. So you were delivering outside of Auckland. I think that's one of the things about delivering online as well, is that it actually opens up access. You were talking about the 2-hour drive to visit your museum. Well, you know, there's no driving involved, is there, in an online learning experience? And actually that's, you know, in terms of accessibility of getting connection with these amazing institutions around the country, actually breaks down that barrier, doesn't it? So although it puts up some barriers in terms of teaching and learning, it does break down some other barriers in terms of cost and transport. So yeah, and accessibility. Just scrolling through for some other questions. Lisa says, can we see some of the clips? I don't know if you have any of the video clips that you were talking about available to share.
They'll be coming soon, and we'll have them up on our website. They are, if you go into our website and click on Learn, all of our resources are there under programs. So we're hoping to have one on the death ship up very, very soon.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're all underway. We've prioritised our list of wants for the education team, so hopefully they're not going to be long.
And Canterbury Museum says, thanks for this. I'm looking at virtual programs over the next year in preparation for bouncing around the protection framework. Fantastic pieces of information to consider when planning. So yeah, I think that sums it up for me, is that, you know, your experiences and your experiments and your trials and errors is just feeding everyone within the sector when they're thinking about their own planning and how they might come to grips with some of this online learning. And who knows how long we'll be in the situation of having to use this sort of online learning. Don't have a crystal ball, not quite sure, but it could be some time, I suppose, or we might, like you say, dip in and out of it as well. I just wanted to put it out there to some other people who have experimented with virtual visits who are on the call. to ask the question about ways of breaking through the barrier that the screen puts up between that connection between the audience and the presenter. Is anyone who's already kind of had some experience in this realm got any other suggestions or their own reflections on ways of getting around that? Looking at you, Laura.
There's also a question from Education Secretary Martin at the bottom.
Yeah, I thought you might be looking at me there. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting journey, isn't it? And I'm still learning so much about this. And it's been really, really useful listening to you. And thank you so much for sharing, everybody. One of the ways that I've kind of like one of the things I do is set it up so that the teacher understands that yes, they are moderating. If I am delivering to students within their respective homes, and that's been the situation. I've delivered VEs to Auckland, for example, and to sort of remind, in a sense, what you're doing is you're reminding them that they have a role to play, and sort of getting the and also setting it up so that they understand that if I want to ask a question, want to hear an answer, then somebody has to be sitting really close to the mic. I mean, it's really basic stuff, but it needs to be stated. And I quite like it if a student, I suggest that either the teacher or the teacher selects a student to sit next to the mic so that that kind of responses can be given, because we haven't actually used things like Answer Garden or anything like that, and that's something we need to kind of like have a think about as a team. For art ones, I've gotten children to sketch in sections of artworks as I've moved through the galleries, and they end up kind of, in a sense, kind of creating a visual diary of the session, and that's quite nice. Although what I often find is that it starts off really well and then it tails off because actually they're just really interested and they kind of don't necessarily want to just keep on listening and looking at what you're showing them, really, and they don't necessarily want to do much drawing. But I'm so interested in learning new and different ways of kind of getting some interactivity, because yeah, as you say, we don't want to be didactic in our delivery. Yeah, it's a learning journey we're all on.
Thank you, Laura. We've got another comment and question. Thanks for this. Really valuable to hear your experiences. Are there any more tips around management? What worked well to discuss with the teacher beforehand around helping them facilitate the online session? Has anyone got an answer to that, Marlene?
Yes, I actually have just thought about something that that would be a really worthwhile sharing, I think. The teacher in the Waikato school got us to turn the live chat off because I think she was worried that her kids were going to put on inappropriate comments, whatever. Actually, in retrospect, I really wish that we hadn't done that, because I think that might have been an opportunity for the kids to really engage with us. And because there were three of us there, one of us could have been on the live chat, connecting with the kids and answering their questions. So yeah, I would think that that's something to negotiate with the teacher before you start your session.
And Natalie, do you have something to add as well?
Yeah, thank you. Further to that as well, just I think it's really important to keep in mind that being in this virtual classroom, it's still a classroom. So there still has to be routines and expectations that students would have in their normal classroom. And obviously with different schools having different expectations, they might not be running it how they would with a normal classroom. So I think it's really important that when you talk to the teaching team first, that you kind of put that across in the nicest way possible, that you want to have fun, you want it to be engaging, but you want the expectations to be what they would be if that class was actually coming to visit your class at coming to visit your museum. So like for us, we did, as Lee said, having the role already done before we came in, giving the teacher time to set those expectations before you come in. And like Marlene said, then giving the teacher that decision of whether or not their class is capable of having the live chat open or not. Obviously, for lots of students that would be fine, and maybe if they get a stern telling to from their teacher beforehand, then they might be fine. But there might be some that it wouldn't work for. So I think, yeah, just being really clear that you want those expectations of the behaviour that you would have in a normal classroom. You don't want people lying down on their bed in their pajamas. They're on a school visit. I think that's something to keep in mind.
Thank you. We've got several hands up. This is very exciting. I don't know who to go to first. We'll go to Lee because he's one of our presenters, and then we'll go to Rebecca and then Bev.
I'd just like to just echo what's already been said, but I think just having I think kind of that classroom management is really easy if you've already connected with them, and they may have not met you yet, but they would have maybe through the invite that we sent them, or we did. I just thought I'd share a screen here. We did for our year 7s. We had a Padlet here where we had three things where they could answer. They could. Before we even met them, they were in here and writing responses. What is this Maori stone used for? How many ways can you use a coconut? And things like that. And then kind of we could refer back to them. We're already, they're a warm audience in some ways, if you know what I mean. And then the behavior doesn't become a problem as much because you're not just some strange head that's come onto their screen. You've actually connected with them beforehand. So through the invites and through some pre-activities, I think you could even maybe check in with the class. Hey, I'm going to see you next week, and look forward to seeing you there. Then they kind of know what to expect. That's all I had to add. Yeah.
Thank you, Lee. Well, we're actually at 4:31. I will take the last couple of hands up, but we need to be brief and be aware of people might need to leave the meeting for other commitments. So we'll go to Rebecca next.
Sorry about this. Just quickly, when I did the webinar last week, it was freakish speaking to the screen when I just saw my screen sharing my slides, and it was so much better, as I think it was someone said, because we had 2 laptops, so I had Helen and Mel and smiley faces looking at me, responding to what I said, and I can't imagine just talking without seeing faces. It would have been I would have been exactly the same. I would have frozen. Yeah. And I think that it's really important just to get, even if it's just a little screen beside you, somehow some kind of double approach. Remember, there's a puppet or a hat.
Debbie, that's your cue for your puppet. Oh, hilarious. So Beverly, would you like to have the last word?
Thank you. No, I've enjoyed this very much. And I'm not worried about the mistakes we're going to make because we can recover from those. We're an outdoor site, which is a little bit different from a museum site, and we want the students on site, but are we going to get them? Thanks very much.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone else who's commented. There's been some really wonderful comments today. And we've got 2 other organisations who've just mentioned that they've run virtual experiences or are planning to run them. So watch out, we might be hitting you up for presenting at a webinar. Okay, so before I say goodbye and we have our closing karakia, I just wanted to give you a heads up about the webinar that we've got running next week. It's a bit different. We're going to be hearing from some of our friends over the ditch in Australia, 2 national museums in Canberra, the National Art Gallery and the National Portrait Gallery in Canberra. Both have quite substantial digital learning programs. So we've got a couple of educators that are going to talk us through some of the things they've done prior to COVID and since COVID. So it would be really interesting to hear their experiences and what they've been up to. And that's our last one for the year before we have a break over the summer. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'll close with our karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhi, ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te arataka tā, koia rā e rongo, whakariria ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you, everybody.